Are you in a position where you're defined by your age, and that's limiting you to pursue a dream or goal you want to accomplish? The More Than Your Age podcast is about having conversations with women who fully live their lives without being dictated or defined by their age. This is a space to encourage women who feel blocked to pursue a dream or goal based on their life circumstances. Welcome to the More Than Your Age podcast. I am your host, Erica Pasvar. Let's start living life fully and become more than your age. Today, I am joined by the host of the Encuentras Your Voice podcast, a structural engineer, which I'm so excited about this, and founder of Encuentras Media, Consuelo Crosby. Welcome to the More Than Your Age podcast.
Oh, thank you so much, Erica. It was such an honor to meet you and such a pleasure to be here. I feel like I could use a little amplification for voices here.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Consuelo, I was looking through your website and social media beforehand, and I got this impression that, you are a proud Peruvian woman who likes to have a lot of fun. Am I right in that assumption?
I think it's kind of in the DNA already, so I can't take too much credit for it. But I live it truly and out loud.
Yeah, that's awesome. I have several Peruvian friends who are so fun. They're hard workers and they're always down for a good time. So I'm excited about our conversation today. Well, I was intrigued by your story for several reasons. You have such an impressive life resume. I love how you shared with me that age was never an indicator of ability or non-ability for you. You said that you learned it from your mama as a way of living large. What did you mean by that?
My mother, who was born in Arequipa, Peru, in the south, she was the matriarch in our family, and a family of all men and me. And so I learned right from birth that the script was flipped in our family when it came to how women were in the U.S. society. And she was the moneymaker. She started an American corporation 10 years after coming here to the U.S. So that my father could have a job. And it was an engineering firm that we worked in as kids. That was part of our first-gen existence.
Oh.
And the thing is, she never told us her age. And we never thought to ask because it just wasn't a concept in the house that, oh, I wish I were a certain age. And so we never went back to it. And so she had this love of life that would, if she had a curiosity about something, she would jump on it. She wanted to try something, she would jump on it. That was my mentor. And I completely followed it. I remember her taking tennis lessons, and she was probably in her 40s for the first time taking tennis lessons. She took flamenco classes. She took Chinese watercolor painting. She took French lessons. She was always a learner. And I think that's why age doesn't matter, because you could always learn whatever you're intrigued by. It doesn't have to last, but you could always learn.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm curious to know too, when it was her birthdays, you never knew her age. So did you ever ask, or it was just like, we're just celebrating my birthday?
We would ask, and then she would just wish I had her with me. She would just kind of, click her tongue and go, oh, it doesn't matter. And that was the end of it. At some point, and I can't precisely remember when, we did have to, like in some form or another, application, give the birth date of your parents, right? And that's when it's like anything else you learn out of childhood. You're like, oh. That's when I did the math and figured out how old she was. But
yeah,
to her blessed dying day, she did not act her age.
Wow,
as prescribed, as prescribed stereotypical age.
Yes, yeah, that's a good way to put it. So then when you would look at her and just see her trying all these different things, did you grow up with this mentality too that I can do whatever I want. I can try whatever I want. I had this woman as my role model, or kind of how, like, if you look back, how did that affect you growing up?
Well, I think it was a catalyst, at sometimes an anchor though. because I have 3 brothers. So there was that aspect also. So between the 2 of them, I kind of had it in stereo. Actually, culturally, she would say I couldn't do a lot of things. And I think that was very difficult for me from a very young age, and especially compared to the boys. So there was this double standard. There was this girls have to do this and boys have to do that, which when you're under that kind of mentality, you're looking at her going, but you're head of a corporation that's all men. How can this be? So in one regard, yes, because I saw her do so many different things. Anything she wanted to do, she would do it. More so than the men in the family. And then at the same time, there was that cultural essence of, but you can't do that. So you can't go to sleepovers. You can't go date a boy. You have to be in a group. There's so many of those things at the same time. It was really a rather challenging way of growing up to understand what you were to do that was authentically you and not what you were supposed to do.
Interesting. That's very interesting. Okay. And so then that can go down the whole, I have so many other questions with that too, but we'll stop there.
That's another episode.
We can get real deep, which I've done before, but we'll go to the engineering. So you mentioned that, she started this engineering business. And so you grew up kind of in this environment. And did you know, because you started your business at a very young age yourself. So as a teenager, did you think, I'm going to do this? And what was your viewpoint? And then what specifically was structural engineering, but kind of what does that look like for those of us who just lump engineering as you work on things, you build things, right?
Oh, yeah, we could go another rabbit hole down there. Okay, first of all, going back to my mother and cultural influence, as a teenager, I was a really great artist, and I wanted to be a record album cover artist. I wanted to, at 17, move to New York City, get away from the boys, and live my best life, just being available to bands in New York and creating their still albums, full-blown albums back then of cover art. And when I presented this as, okay, I'll be graduating, this is what I'm going to do, oh no, I got the shutdown. So for many immigrant families, a lot of first gens, the first thing you get from your parents is, 1, you have to be highly educated, and 2, you have to be highly educated in a very prominent profession. So my choices that I was given was, no, you could be a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. Well, in my time, doctors and lawyers were almost 100% men. And so was engineering practically. However, I still love to draw. I still love to have this vision of, I love to create things in my head. So I thought, okay, well, at least engineering's creative. I had lawyers in my family and I was tired of being in that subset. And so I knew that structural engineering was a very creative sense of anything from homes to high-rises, from bridges to towers. Everything practically needs an engineer. A structural engineer, you live 90% of your time indoors, which is really hard to accept when we're trying to be healthy and outdoors, but 90%. So the influence there is, wouldn't it be great for all of those times you're inside to have a really great space to be in? That piqued my curiosity. That made me leave my reluctancy and say, well, okay, I can make some really creative, cool buildings out there then. And I did love math and science. I totally love physics and calculus. So
yeah. And it's so interesting. Stereotypically, that is not a pair, as far as math and science and then this creative artsy usually is not a pair. But, we're all about, who cares about what's typically a pair, So, okay. So then you decide, all right, I'll do this. This gives me, a type of creative outlet. Walk us through how then you started your own business, because most 23-year-olds will, are just like, I'm looking for a job. I need a job. And that entrepreneurial aspect is also kind of
not as prevalent either.
Yeah, that I can attribute to my mother because I got to see her lifestyle in that they own their own company, and what that generated for a lifestyle when you own your own company is a lot of freedom, especially freedom when it comes to raising a family or choosing how you want to spend your time. Granted, it's really difficult. It's really difficult because you don't get this automatic paycheck. It just because you show up. It's really difficult in having to go after your own work, market yourself, find your projects, do the projects, build the products, get paid. All of that's really crazy, but the freedom, which is core to who I am, that very spontaneous, let's go do this, that you attribute with your Peruvian friends. I wanted to have that freedom. Structural engineering, when you go through school and come out of it, you are fully prepared to start working. You're hired before you graduate. It doesn't have that same difficulty for a lot of other people leaving university to determine what they should do because they're studying something much more expansive. In structural engineering, you're going to be doing exactly what you did in school. So it's easier to go ahead and start. But then I was the first woman hired in a firm of 40 men in San Francisco. I was 21 and I'm like, oh, how did I get here again? But they were great. There was I called them my big band of brothers. They were very respectful and kind. I wouldn't say that of the ownership of the company. That was another story. That created the environment that I did not want to stay in very long. So in engineering in California, you have to work under a licensed engineer for at least 2 years before you can take your licensing exam. And again, there was only 7% who passed the year I took it. And of those 7%, I don't know how many were women. They didn't even count. But once I had that stamp, it's like the Willy Wonka gold ticket. You can do whatever you want, wherever you want, whenever you want with that stamp. So that's why I started on my own. Yeah, I was 23, 24.
Yeah, it's so impressive. So because you had this stamp and you had been working in it for a few years, did you just already know businesses and had relationships with different companies and told them, hey, I'm doing this on my own, or kind of how did that get going?
Yeah, good question. I did go back and contract back to other engineers who had left the same big firm and went off on their own. And some of them went off pretty big already. And in those situations, that's where I got to design Larry Ellison's Oracle flagship headquarters and shake his hand because we had the end. When you finish a building, you sign the last beam to put in place, and he was there. And I was like, wow. I was pregnant and 27. I'm like, this is kind of a mind-blowing life I'm creating here. So it was pretty easy at that point. Because we're kind of unicorns, there aren't many of us that are accessible. So there's big firms, and big firms are not going to help the majority of the people, right? So the individual engineers are your most accessible for when you want to do your own home, your own remodel, when you have small business buildings that are going to be altered, remodeled. When you start getting into the big firms, they're just way too busy. They're too big and too busy. But I did work on a high-rise in downtown LA. She's my queen. I love her. You will see her in every movie. You will see her on the news at night. 777 Figueroa. Go give her a hug. She's my favorite.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's been a great career. I think the one element I could attribute back to my mom after saying I had to go this route is it did give me a great life. It gave me a lot of freedom, everything I hoped for. It helped me raise my kids on my own. That wasn't part of the plan, but without having them go to daycare and having a nanny, I was able to raise them one-on-one until they went to school. And even then, pick them up after school, really be present in their life.
Yeah, that's really impressive. That's something actually I wanted to ask you too. I can't remember if this was on your website or if this is something you wrote to me, but you said something about, you're wearing those stilettos, you're going into those meetings, you're in this male-dominated industry. But then at the same time, like, you are a mom, you're a mother, and you're in this very high-esteemed profession, but you just said you were able to stay with them and take care of them and drop them off at school. I had a conversation with a really good friend of mine the other day who was just like, I need to work, but I want to still be able to be present. And so I'm curious to know with you, how were you really able to make that happen and be present while doing this insanely impressive job and providing for your kids and doing all the things? How did you do that?
You're starting to make me feel like, oh my, how did I do that? No, it is something, again, from my upbringing, I really loved my childhood. And one thing that I really felt I wanted to bring forward in my own life was being there for my family, for creating that. And I think when it came to the industry, I realized while I was still in the office, there's a lot of wasted time. I'm sure everyone with jobs knows this, right? There's a lot of wasted time that you could be doing something else, hence the benefit of remote work. But having my own kids at home, I could make my own schedule, right? I could say when I was taking calls, when I would be on site to check the buildings, when I would be actually doing the calculations and the drawings. That was all on me, especially as my own owner of the firm. And so I said, children only get one childhood. They get one chance. And we've all experienced it personally or have been around people. When things go a little sideways in childhood, it's really difficult. It's really hard to move through life without healing that. So I wanted to try my best in not having that disruption or that pull enter their childhood. And even though I was single mom, when they were 2 and 5, by the time they were 2 and 5, I especially wanted to be there for them at that point. And I just didn't think I saw the benefit for doing it differently. Personally, for me, I didn't see the benefit. I really enjoyed it. Now, it did mean there were some all-nighters. There were times when my daughter said she would help me and drew all over the drawings, which were pen and paper back then and not
my
the
goodness.
computer. So there were some crazy stressful times. But again, I really feel that kids get one chance, and I wanted to do the best for that, even if I took the hit on time and energy and all that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. It's one opportunity, and you want to do the best that you can. I want to share too what else you have on your website, just as you being the mom who was an engineer, who sewed their clothes, helped with calculus and art. You wired the kitchen remodel and cooked from scratch, all while running your own company. Just so impressive. When the days were really hard, because I can imagine that you had really hard days, what were some of the things that you had to tell yourself to do in order to just get through those really hard moments?
I hear that. I hear that a lot, and I still feel that. I still feel the way life is for us, very busy here in the U.S. That one thing that helped me a lot, and I learned it very young. Again, I learned it very young to offset my spontaneous wanting to leave and not wanting to be in that 8 to 5 job, is that you could always make money. You can always make money. And that you don't set up expectations for yourself that may be out of your control, because that's where you get that pull, that struggle, when maybe we're trying to be really successful at a younger age or have that house at a young age, or, putting goals that we get stuck on the goal rather than the process. And the process might take a lot longer than you think. So at that time, you just give yourself grace. I had to give myself grace and just say, I can always make money. If this doesn't happen this year, we'll make it happen another year. But to stay focused on what was more important to me. And to me, it was creating that happy, fun, familial goofy. It was really goofy. It was just the three girls. They were great. They were fantastic. But I wanted to set them up for financial freedom, for financial independence, to have a career, so that they wouldn't go through what I had gone through in some regards, to give them their best shot, make their own choices, and have the freedom for those choices to actually happen.
Yeah. I really like what you said about you can always make money, because it's true. I think we get in that limited mindset too of like, it has to look this way and it has to be that 9-to-5 job, and that there's a process in it. Like, yes, you want that goal, but there is a process in that, and taking to get, what you need to do in order to get to that goal. And you were able to create this life for yourself and for your daughters, and, they're successful now as well. And I want to flash forward a little bit some time, and at 43, so we're kind of jumping from career to like a fun hobby, but at 43, you climbed the glaciers of Patagonia, which is also impressive. Like I told you guys, she has this impressive life resume. What made you decide you want to do that? And, was it by yourself? Were you with friends? How did that happen?
This is one of those experiences that I feel like I look back on and go, oh, girl, you're lucky you're alive. So when I was younger, we had a TV show. I'm not sure now. I forgot what the name of it was. It was a TV show that came on weekly, and it would be about the wilderness. And it was also bolstered by National Geographic. So National Geographic was epic then. And these were places that nobody had seen. This wasn't Instagram. This wasn't open borders. This was, it was a time when I was younger that you didn't know of these places. So when I saw Patagonia, then the glaciers, something kicked in. I was little. And I said, I want to go there. One day I want to go there. And I just had it in the back of my mind. And then literally the way my life happens, at that time, 40 years later or so, my neighbor goes, you want to go to Patagonia? And I'm thinking, wow, yes. My hands dropped a great one on. I was like, heck yeah. So he actually set it all up. He figured it all up. I literally just went for the ride. However, I did all the driving. And I think that was part of the craziest experience, because this was pre-smartphones. This was pre-GPS. We did not even bring a map. I don't know what we were thinking. I drove from Calafate, which is in the middle of the country, all the way down to Patagonia. And at the end, because we were going all the way down to Torres de Paine, which is actually in Chile. It's way down at the tip of the continent, and without a map. And we got in this little car, and for 8 hours, we did not pass another building, another person, therefore not another gas station. So we pull into the border crossing in Chile, and I was just asking him, where can I get gas? And the border patrol turns and shows me this house. Go ask Oscar. That's the type of trip it was. That was the craziness of it all. But he and I, and 2 guides from Argentina who lived there, and one guy, Dominique, he was from Spain. We went out on the glaciers. It was absolutely stunning. It was absolutely crazy. You were out on the craggy tips. You had the crampons on. I was in front of an ice cave that now, went down to the middle of the earth. I have the picture, and I'm thinking, actually, I have the picture of the glaciers right there.
Ooh.
Lots of crazy things, but my impetus, what really makes me thrive, I love doing those once in a lifetime things. I wanted to try it. We had to cross the rivers on Alpine. And I think the craziest thing was when the 2 guides suddenly stopped while we're on these craggy tops of the ice field. and said, we have to get off the field. We have to get off. You have to go as fast as possible. The winds are coming.
Oh, no.
And if the winds came, that we were going to be stuck trying to get off safely, and they would just push us down into the crevasses. So we're just like, and we had to climb up and over the moraine, which is the backside where the glacier pushes it. It pushes all these rocks up to make a moraine. So it's like this 90-foot wall of rocks, boulder. We had to alpine cross over the river. We had to get the heck out of there. It was one of the craziest things I've ever done.
That is crazy. What type of training did you have beforehand?
Oh, no.
Nothing.
Zero. None.
Of course.
None. We don't even live in the snow. I don't. No, that's what I mean. That's very much my risk-taking lifestyle that I have. Yeah.
How old were your girls at this time?
That's the funny part. That goes back to the cultural way of doing things. My kids, I set it all up. It took 10 people to replace me.
Wow.
For making sure that the two of them were still doing their lives seamlessly. So they were like 15 and 13 because they couldn't drive yet. I remember that. So I needed those people. They played volleyball, club volleyball. They had to go all over the country that time I was gone. And I did not tell my mother because I knew she would say I couldn't go.
Yeah.
I shouldn't go. She'd probably say bad things about me being a negligent mom, leaving my daughters behind. And so I didn't tell her. But she found out. And by the time I got home, she would not talk to me for 6 months.
Oh.
She was so livid that I had left the girls behind because it was a 3-week trip. I have to say, it was 3 weeks. But the beauty of it is my daughters were so excited, supportive, happy for me, even though they did get the short end of this. But yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, you had 10 helpers and it was 3 weeks, and they could also look at that like, look what my mom did. My mom just accomplished this insanely crazy task. She could have died, but she didn't.
Yeah, I think they knew me pretty well by then. That was kind of in keeping with who I was, who I am now. I went back for my master's when I was 50, master's in communications. So I think without ever having planned it subconsciously, I did the same thing my mom did. Just show for anybody, not just my daughters, but for anybody, that you could live your life so large out loud and do whatever you want, whenever you want, even if it's just that one time, right?
Yeah. Right.
It's not like I was going to be a professional glacier climber. I'm not even a rock climber in the gym. I was never going to do this again. And yet I did it. And I want that for everybody. Just go try it. Just whatever you feel is your curiosity. You don't have to train for it necessarily. You don't have to study. You don't have to be the best at it. Just go do it.
Yeah, because you'll regret it if you don't. Absolutely.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Well, okay, so you brought up what my next question was going to be. So thank you, Consuelo, for just like leading me right into it. So while your girls were in college, you decided to pursue your master's in communication management and to begin broadcasting. You mentioned that you had this desire for art and art design for these albums. And so I was going to say, it seems so different from engineering, but not really. But broadcasting, it's still a little different. So how did this come to be, and kind of walk us through that?
Yeah, that was, I've always been a public speaker. I've always been mentoring for women going into STEM fields, for anybody to go into structural engineering, really promoting the Latina community. And so I've always been a speaker. I've always been out there in front of crowds. Never had a problem with that. It's kind of like you had to carve your own space anyway, as the only woman a lot of times in the room. But I think I was getting to a point where in my life, I was holding in everything that we've been talking about now. It was a time when no one wanted to hear it. there was no space to really share it. And I felt I can't be the only one, obviously, especially in California. I'm not the only one. There's a lot of first gens here. So I set it up in my head, not with the masters, but with the idea of just having some place to tell this story. And coming from an engineering curriculum, the 4 years of engineering, you had 2 electives. 2. It was 210 units and 2 electives. So there was no bandwidth for anything that was creative, that was structured. There was no writing, there was no anything. And I felt like, okay, I do need training here. I do need to go back and get some kind of education and understanding of expression and the industry and creative writing and all of that. And that's why I went back for the master's. And I have to say, within a few weeks, I called my daughter, who was at LMU down in LA, and a communications major. So that really helped me. And I was crying. I'll never forget it. 4th of July weekend, crying because I didn't know how to write a research paper. I had never had to write one. I didn't have to cite. I didn't have to have references. I didn't know anything. And I was crying. I would rather do calculus and physics.
Wow.
So it was an uptick. The learning curve was sharp. But it did give me the tools to come through on the other side and go, okay, all right, let's do this. Let's expand the platforms for women, for Latinas, to be able to share their stories, to have their narrative more prominent, to make space for all women to have their voices heard. And I love this choice. I'm thriving. I love this.
Yeah. When you had this idea that you wanted to, and we will get to that, but I might just be jumping around, but that's okay.
That's
when
fine.
you had this idea that you wanted to share the voices of the Latinas in your community overall, just the Latina culture, did you know immediately, oh, I'm going to do a podcast? Or was it, I just want to have like publications out? Or did you have an idea specifically where you were going to take that? Or was it just kind of this idea, but I really want to learn how to present that better?
Yeah, I'm more the person that just does it and then goes back and says, wait, what was I
What are we
supposed to know? So I just decided out of the blue. And I think a lot of it was for me too, to even like just get it off my chest, get it out of my mind, my own experience. I just felt like I'm going to talk into this black hole and you're just unleash everything that I can't carry anymore. And no, I just went and bought all the equipment and just started. I'm just like, I'm a great learner. I do love self-learning. So I'm a self-starter in that regard. And I just figured out all of how to start and how to get it uploaded, what to do. And a lot of the first, I think, season and a half, 1 full year and a half is just me and my cultural experience and what it was like, and my own stories. And then we get into having other guests on and getting their stories. And the stories are fabulous. They're ridiculous. You just don't hear them every day, which is my point. These are everyday people. You're probably in the same room with them at any given point, and you don't know their story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, I want to get to some of those. I will get to those in just a little bit. But I am curious to know, when you were in your master's program, were you still running your business as well? The structural engineering business?
Oh my gosh. I tell you, 2013 will be a year of infamy in my life. In 2013, I was taking care of my dying mother 24/7 at her house. I had a full-time engineering career still going, and I had 2 girls in private university. And I decided to start my master's full-time. And I was like, it's just one of those things that I felt at that point in my life, I can't wait anymore. It's time to just do it and just crush through and do it all together. And I think one of the things that I'd really love your listeners to take away is that it's okay if it's messy. Life's messy. And it's not as though you have to do everything, but you don't have to do everything spectacular. And so as long as you're getting what you want from it and the people around you feel supported, if that's your role for them, they're going to appreciate your presence regardless. So don't put off doing something because of the roles you play in other people's lives. Have the conversation with them, but move forward in ways, because that one day when people say, well, one day I'm going to do this, that one day may never come. And often it doesn't.
You mentioned that during this time, your daughters were in school themselves and you were taking care of your mother, and you're in school yourself. And I'm curious to know, because you said, that one day may never come. And so you decided, I'm going to push forward. I'm going to do this. This is hard. Life is hard right now. And I'm adding on to it. And it's also continuing to be hard. Did it, by you being in school and kind of having this other outlet, was that kind of like a therapy in a way for you? Or was it like, no, this is just school, let's get it taken care of?
I did appreciate hugely that because it was a master's program, because it was intended for the cohort to be professionals. So we were all professionals already. It's not as though I was with a cohort that was just coming off their undergrad studies. And I really valued that. You're right. That was a really great company of people who had been through life, that all had stories to share of how difficult it can get. And so in that regard, yeah, I was able to talk through some things, but at the same time, I didn't really know what I was going through yet. It took coming through the other side to, again, packing up. How did I survive that? It's a lot of my life. How did I survive that? Because at the time you can't think about it. It may stop you in your tracks if you think too much about it.
Yeah, that's a good takeaway. Like at the moment, you just can't think about it because it might stop you in your tracks. Because I think that's what gets a lot of people, is that it's, oh, I have all this and this and this, and I can't, and I can't, and I can't. But then that's going on is what is stopping them from pushing forward and moving on. You're such a strong woman. I'm like, as I'm listening to you even more and more, I knew it obviously just from what I read about you, but just hearing more of it, I'm like, man, your daughters are lucky, 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 and the people in your life are lucky to have you. So I'm just going to pause and just say thank you again for joining me, because this is, I'm taking so much of what you're sharing with me, myself right now. Well, so the flash forward again, at 53, you got married, which is a whole other thing too that we could get to, but you had your honeymoon in Morocco, which sounds amazing. And you're, pushing past any age barriers there as well, getting married at 53. And then you created your podcast, eventually made your media company, Encuentras, and your Encuentras Media. Your passion is to change Latinas' journeys and share the culture. Would you share a little bit more about how, and if I get this incorrect, please correct me, but how you watched your mom care for your abuelita, and then watching their love. This is something that you had on there for one another. And then you mentioned not being allowed to learn Spanish. I'm so curious with that. And then how it all relates to the heart behind your podcast. I want you to just kind of move on to sharing a little bit about that.
Yeah. Okay. Now I might tear up in this. The strong woman has a very soft underbelly, they say.
It's okay. It's okay.
No, it was my mother. I really feel I have a lot from her. Obviously, I don't have her fear. I have to say that. Obviously, she tried to keep me set and everything. She had huge strength. She had huge compassion, a lot of love, and a lot of that ability to care. And that just comes rapidly into the DNA for me. It's just part of who I am. I saw it. I'm very empathetic to the point of being an empath. Like, I can feel someone before they're even introduced to me. I can know what they're probably about and probably know something that they don't even know about themselves. So it comes easily for me to just lend myself into their life in a way that I probably think they need based on who I feel they are. And so that is where all the caring comes into play, or where all the, come on, let's go have a good time comes into play, because I think they'll probably need it, which is hard to find in society, right? But culturally, family's everything. Family is everything to Latina. And then there's always the flip side. Being the firstborn or the only daughter in the family can be a huge burden. It can be a really difficult task where you're just expected, without any conversation, to be the ally for the parents, to be the advocate, to take over. The boys are coddled. The boys are put over here in a different system. And it can be a place where you don't know what's real in the sense of having cultural expectations and what you want for yourself. There's never that bandwidth in our young lives that allows us to think, well, what do I want? Or what can I do? Because like you've learned, there's a lot of, well, no, you can't do that even if you want to. There's a lot of comparison sometimes to what will people think. And it just comes from culture. It comes from generations. It comes from a lot of the colonialism that entered into these spaces. So it's that journey of self-discovery, of understanding who you really are, what your authenticity is, can be a lifelong journey until you hit that one aha moment where the planets all align and everything from your culture is fueling you and you found your place in the world. And the two to combined, those are your superpowers. So I love it. I love it. But it is a journey, and it is one you really have to stay on for yourself, like really love yourself through it and have the community around you who understand it. Or listen to it on the podcast and have people understand what it's like to support you. But yeah, it is a moment of finding your authenticity, and it's the cultural pride that ends up fueling it for sure.
So then, you're wanting this authenticity and then this culture experience, and you interview these women, and I'd love to hear about, I don't know if you have a conversation or an episode where you're like, oh man, this episode spoke to me, it really helped me a lot, or just anything that as someone who may be listening might say, yeah, I want to take a listen to Encuentras Your Voice and promote your podcast for us.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Erica. I feel like, and this is actually something I'm developing right now as part of a TEDx speaker cohort that I'm in now, that for us here or anywhere in the world, that we all have a common experience. We are all that human experience. And it looks a lot different as across the world and our own experiences. So that anybody's story, as the human story, is relatable to us. And what makes it fascinating and why we watch movies and why we want creative arts is because it's different than ours. And so it's a way of bringing a compassion through understanding of each other also back into the world. Because as you get to know somebody, you really begin to appreciate them and to respect and value them. And it's the only way we get to learn about people is having conversation with them and really listening rather than what maybe society is headed towards now, which is, what can you do for me? How can you make my life better? Are you going to benefit me? And I think that's where a lot of the anger has come in our society when we talk about, you're taking from me. This is my space. And instead, if we learn about people and we learn their journey, we develop compassion for what they've been through. We're excited to hear what they've come successfully to on the other side. That it helps soften our society, which right now could use it, I tell you. When it comes to the women on the podcast, you'd be amazed, one, at what they've gone through. I think one of my really fun, blew my mind episode was Corinne Ostaseski. She is the first woman, and a Latina woman, but the first woman ever in 500 years to have developed her own brand of Scotch whiskey and brought it to market.
Wow.
Exactly. This is a piece that should be common news across the world, that this woman is the only woman in the whole 500-year history of Scotch to have brought her own brand to market. But have you heard it? And the brand is Sia Scotch, SIA, which means, I think it stands for 6 in Gaelic.
Oh.
I'm not sure. Yes, but do we know this? No. Is this headline news? No. You'll know about a celebrity making their version of alcohol before you know of her. Now, why is that, right? So in that regard, that's not a Latina story. That's not something that only people from the community would know or be affected by. This is something that everyone can enjoy. And more so for all the non-Scotch drinkers out there, you think you're non-Scotch drinkers, she intentionally made it to be softer, to be more palatable, to be okay to be mixed, because that's a no-no for most Scotches. And she's developed recipes like toasted croissant syrup to make some of the cocktail recipe. Exactly. Do we not want women involved in this? Yeah. So in that regard, you never know who you're going to hear on our podcast, but you will be in the same room and they will benefit your life. So it's exciting to learn more stories about them.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It just sounds like these women are probably aligned so much with my people too. So that sounds great. Okay, I want to go back to part of the question I had asked just a little bit ago when we were leading into the podcast, and if you want to talk about it, we don't have to, of how the not being taught Spanish or not being able to learn Spanish. You speak Spanish now?
Yeah.
Correct or no? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So
yes. Not
when
fluently,
did you learn? What'd you say?
Not fluently.
That's okay. That's okay. You still speak it. Yeah. I'm just curious about, we don't have to go too into it, but just at what point did you say, no, I'm going to learn Spanish. I want to learn Spanish. I wasn't able to learn it. And now I'm going to learn it.
This is actually funny. Again, going back to I'm a self-learner, I'm a self-starter. When I was very little, by the time I came along in the family, my 2 older brothers were already 7, 8 years old. So they had already gone into the American school system, and they were actually fluent in Spanish. They were fully bilingual. They went back and forth with my mom to Peru. But once they hit school, they got teased, they got bullied, they got beat up. And so by the time I came and I was a girl, my mom thought, oh, no, there's no way I'm going to put her out in this society bilingual in being Peruvian. And so she changed completely how I would be raised. And one of it was not to be bilingual. And to the point, though, she tried to make me very, quote unquote, American by her own personal experiences of what that meant, what people were expecting. And even to the point where my nose, she was worried about my nose being too wide because they don't like wide noses, and she would make it upright. She would pull on it every night when I was little because she said they, and I never knew who they was, they only like upright noses. So the only way that I could come back into my culture, because it's in my DNA, you can't not be who you were born to be. It's too difficult. Right. But her and my aunt would speak Spanish in the house constantly. And you'd hear it. But then I'd hear my name, Consuelito, because he was also Consuelo. So I was Consuelito. Consuelito, Consuelito. And I'm like, what? So what are they talking about? And that and taking years of it through high school, that's what trained my ear. And that's how I learned Spanish. Wow. Yeah. I never told them I knew, though.
Really?
Yeah. They knew I was taking Spanish, but they never believed that I could understand what they were saying, because that was my in, right?
Yeah.
That's where I got all the gossip. It's like, oh, I know what's going on. Oh, you're so busted.
Nice.
Yeah. It's tough.
Yeah. And my dad moved to the States from Iran, and there were certain things culturally that he experienced that were negative because he was different, that I know like we weren't taught certain things because of that. And so I think now we're like, oh, do the bilingual thing, teach us. But I think at that time it was, no, you don't want the bullying. You don't want to be ostracized. You want to conform and fit in. And I don't think it was malintended. I think it was for our protection,
Exactly. It was out of love, parental love. It was definitely for protection.
Yeah.
Because you just didn't know what could happen. And again, the whole reason we have the podcast is to give accurate information, to give real stories from the source rather than what's out there, changing people's ideas. But wow, no, that was, when did he come?
He moved here in 79.
Yeah, wow. Courageous. Good for him. Good for you all. But then the difficulty of feeling like, wait, who am I? Who am I? Am I over here? Am I over there? And the culture inside the house versus when you walked outside.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then all the things that skip, that don't work.
Well, Consuelo, one, I love that you learned Spanish, because sometimes I used to be a Spanish teacher. So sometimes high school Spanish, the kids just, they can learn. I believe they can 100% learn it. So I love that you did it, that you were eavesdropping and they never knew it. But you, which I just think is so neat. So you have done so many things at all different ages, not letting that stop you and doing the things that you want to do, the Glacier, being a female engineer, a strong mother to 2 wonderful daughters. And I know that they probably have so many fantastic things to say about you. You've traveled to 5 continents, you run marathons, master's degree at 51, married at 53, podcast host, founder of media companies. So, the list goes on. And so many nuggets that you've already said are really, really, really helpful for women who struggle, whether it's a life circumstance or feeling like they can't do something because of their age. My final question, which is the question I love to ask all of my guests, and I can't wait to hear from you. So if you could encourage one woman who does feel blocked due to her age or her life circumstance, what would you say to her?
I would say firsthand, find someone who understands where you're at. I think life's too hard to do alone, and we can talk ourselves out of practically anything versus talk ourselves into it. So I really feel like finding someone who's your supporter, who's, find your tribe, and they will be that person who has your back. I think we could do anything when we feel that someone has our back, even if it's when we all fall apart.
Yeah.
Even if it's that warm hug. It's just a sense that you're not alone in it, I think has gotten me the furthest, honestly. And there's so many instances where I wish someone had my back and I would have made some bigger choices. But there's that, and we play a lot of roles. Women play so many roles. There's always some role that's going to say, oh, what if? And that voice is the loudest you hear sometimes, which is really hard. So I would say find your tribe, find those, I would say, women who are going to go, yes, sister, you're going to go do this. They're going to get you out there. They're going to be your biggest believers, and you'll go do it for sure.
I love it. Well, Consuelo, thank you so much for taking your time today to join me. I loved hearing your story. All of your fantastic nuggets were so, so, so good. So, Consuelo, thank you so much for joining me today on the More Than Your Age podcast.
Oh, thank you, Erica. This has been great. I'm so appreciative to be here, and I'm so appreciative that you're holding this platform for us. So thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you.
If you were encouraged by today's episode, like and subscribe to this podcast, leave a review, and share this episode with a friend. You can find me on all of the socials at More Than Your Age. Keep striving for your goals, live fully, and we'll catch you next time on the More Than Your Age podcast.